stuff all taken apart, and what I want to show you is here's the rear China wall on the intake of the tunnel ram for the Lil Red truck. And you can see I always had a leak, so I smeared this back there hoping, knowing it wasn't going to fix it, but hoping it was going to for our trip to Syracuse. It's been like that since 2019. So I just ran a razor underneath this and cut this off. There's my leak. See right there? And if you look, it corresponds with that gap right there. So even though I had a decent enough bead where it squished out, sometimes it just doesn't seal right. I probably should have put a little bit more on. I remember when I was doing this, when I ran out of silicone as I was sealing the intake, and I had to open up another tube, so that could have been what caused it. But that was my intake leak right there. Now the other, you can see I got some gas staining here. That's because when I put this intake on the car, Wyand actually discontinued the gaskets that go in here, so I just tried to use a sealer. Didn't work, but since then they come back with the gaskets again, so Mr. Gasket makes them, so I can put the correct gaskets in there and seal that up better. So we get all disassembled, and we're brought it down and bead blasted it. Got it all nice and clean that way. And when aluminum comes out of the bead blaster, it always has a kind of like, I don't know, it's like weird skin or something on it. It doesn't seem to look right. So I always rinse it off anyway. But one trick I found is I just use wheel cleaner that's good for aluminum wheels and stuff. Spray it down with that, and then hose it off like you would your wheels, and it kind of restores it back to that natural aluminum finish. So we're going to be putting our thermostat back in. There's nothing wrong with it, and there's no sense even buying another one. But I'll show you one trick I do is I drill a couple holes in there, so that way when you're filling your radiator back up, you don't have to wait for the thermostat and top it back off. It'll actually kind of burp the air bubbles out on its own before you do that. So just drops in like that. I got to clean up my O-ring yet, and put our water neck back on. Putting our heads together, and we got using the Holley gaskets. These were discontinued for a while, so when I last had this tunnel ram together, I just used a gasket maker from Permatex, and it worked. And this is supposed to be fuel resistant to all automotive fuels, but towards the end, before I pulled the engine apart, I was starting to get some gas leakage out of the back by the distributor. I used the same stuff on the Willys with my big block intake, but I was able to get the gaskets at that time, and that's not leaking a drop. So I think the gasket's gonna make the difference. So here's the gasket. They have this little tab on them like this, so it kind of tells you which direction they go on top of the tunnel ram. And you can see this one, if I flip it this way, they are directional, so check your fit. If I line that up, you can see it's kind of overhanging in spots, but when I flipped it over, it fit like a glove. So that one's perfect there. This one fits really good like this. But that Holley number, it's a for the Wyand intake, it's 8984WND, and you can get them right from Holley. I ordered mine through, I believe, Summit or Jags. These bolts, these are the factory bolts that hold the tunnel ram together. They do have a lock washer on them, but I've heard a lot of people had problems with them loosening up. So we're going to use some old blue Loctite. This is, I know it's a red bottle, but it's an old can of blue that I've had for probably, this bottle's been kicking around probably longer than I've been alive. But I'll put a little blue on that so it goes in there, and I've never had a problem with my tunnel ram loosening up on either this or the Willys. This stuff comes out pretty runny. So what I'll do is I'll just put a thin bead of it around the aluminum. The other thing I like about this sealer is it's aluminum color. So if it squishes out, you don't see this ugly black or orange or ugly blue stuff gooping out all over your intake. And just a nice little thin coat around where the gasket's got a bond. You can see I already did the rear one. That one's already stuck down. And we'll get this in, stick that gasket on, and before I flip it over, I'll put a bead around the lower half, so that way the gasket's got sealer on both sides, and that'll help keep it snug and down where we need it to be. You can see it just pushes down nice. And we stick it. Slippery little bugger right now. I got this bottle of blue Loctite, my first house. The shed had all sorts of cool stuff in it. I remember finding that bottle. I was like, man, it's like liquid gold, especially with the prices are on this stuff now. I don't even know if they sell in a bottle that big anymore. So I'm going to start all the bolts first. Hey, you should always start the bolts first and not tighten them down, or else you're going to be fighting with the whole thing. So that. thread locker on there. Carburetor's just set on there because I still got to replace the base gaskets, and when we put it on the engine, we don't want the weight of the carburetors on there when we're setting the intake. But what I want to show you guys real quick is these Mr. Gasket scoops. They've been around forever. I cut the tabs off and took the screen out of the front so it can breathe a little easier. I don't think those screens really do much in the way of stopping anything. But they're a little shorter than some of the things, and they come with a really short paper element, so they're kind of restrictive. So what I found is these K&N filters, they're a little taller, almost an inch taller, and they still fit inside the scoop. So that's about the biggest air cleaner you can fit inside these Mr. Gasket scoops. So for those running them that want to upgrade to it, the number is A062A4. So you'll need 2 of those. We put those in my old 55. We had them in my dad's Corvette and stuff like that. So it was a good upgrade to those crappy little tiny paper filters that come with those Mr. Gasket scoops. And when you set these on here, the other trick I want to show you, they come with bolts. So rather than put the bolts in and try to struggle with finding the holes, any of you guys that have run these scoops know that these slotted adjuster holes are really a pain in the butt to try to find throw the hole to thread the bolt in. So instead, what I did is I threaded and Loctited the bolts in to make studs from the top. So then all I use is a nut with a built-in lock washer, making it so much easier to remove and put the scoop on. So when you set it on there, you just line it up with the holes, and once you get them lined up, fall right in like that, and then you can reach in and put your screws on nice and easy. So that's a tip for them to run these Mr. Gasket scoops. Stud them, it makes it a lot easier to take them on and off, and get those thicker K&N filters, put a little bit longer stud in your carburetor, and you'll breathe easier.